to reduce the need for large centralized projects. So I think that'll be interesting for everyone. We also have Gert, Peter Brook from Planet Amazon, who will offer some remarks and may be called upon as an impromptu interpreter once we'd hope to have Chief Ninawa to offer the opening, but I believe he's getting through security at the moment, so hopefully he'll be able to join us a bit later. And we have a colleague also from, I believe, the Indigenous Action Network?
Indigenous
Climate Network, yeah, sorry, who will be sharing some thoughts as well. So that's kind of the running order. And I guess with that, I will turn it over to Mindahi to give us some thoughts on Article 6. Obviously, these discussions around the financing mechanisms are important, but they can also come with significant risks as well.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome, and very honored to be here in this panel. I'm Mindahi Bastida from the Otomi Toltec peoples from central Mexico. And talking about these issues about development and what it means about how we can tackle this systemic crisis. First of all, let me say that we are passing through very difficult times at local level, but also at the global level. This is a human problem. Human species, we have misbehaved so much with the relationship with nature and the sacred. So this is about the Dominion Code. Whatever we are facing is because of colonialism, because taking over instead of taking care. And this financial way of seeing the world, commodification of nature, commodification of any living system is killing life. So I was in 1992 at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, and I witnessed the signing agreements of the three binding agreements that are very important for the environment and to protect biodiversity. But you can see 30 years later, we are not doing better than we were before. More pollution is in the atmosphere, more pollution is in the soils, more pollution is in our blood. And not just among humans, but also within the plants and minerals and animals. So when we are talking about the Kyoto Protocol and the clean development mechanisms, it is just another way of extending this Dominion Code. Because, you know, even with the newborn red plus and red, and the red mechanisms to, you know, there was a principle around the trade and environment issue, because trade saw environment as a threat, and the environment saw trade as a threat as well for life systems. So then we began to talk about sustainable development and around intergenerational equity. But the problem is that we are seeing this from the anthropocentric thinking, anthropocentric thought. Even some scientists say that we are living in an Anthropocene. But I can tell you that this is about how we see life. And it seems that human beings in many doctrines, in many universities, in many institutional educations, we are taught that humans are the peak of the creation or the most intelligent species. But it's not true. Because we are seeing that now that we can see that more than 1 million species are at risk of extinction. And you have heard that 80% of biodiversity is in the original nations and peoples' territories. But let's not take it for granted. It's a way of living, it's a way of being, it's a way of responsibility in the world. So it's a lot of work. It's not just to do nothing, it's a lot of work. And it's based in the ancestral way of living. The ancestral wisdom tells us that we have this relationship with nature as a sacred entity. So when we were in COP 15, we were in, it was signed the Paris Agreement. But many people saw how this was failing because there's no there's a beautiful agreement, but the action is not being taken enough. So this Article 6, even we were fighting to be acknowledged as original peoples, but also the human rights issue. Because this is about, not just about social, but collective rights. Because now the companies, even they have more rights than communities. Some companies even, they have more rights, even, from some nation states. So this kind of entities are killing life. And we are said that these nature-based solutions are going to save us. But it's just another way of commodification of life. So from that, we can see that I can put some examples very, very fast. The reforestation in some communities has created so much division at the local level. In some places, we cannot even live in a traditional way because we are forbidden to go into those forests. So what are we doing in that regard? We are asking to protect all biodiversity, not just 80% in our territories. Because life is at risk. Because when we pray, we don't pray just for the 80%. We take consideration about all life systems. If we want to make it as human beings, we have to protect all the biodiversity that is left. Because any species has the right to live and thrive. So who are the ones, who are we to say this and this other? So we need to remember what kind of creatures we are. And really these mechanisms is just, they sound beautiful, they sound very rational in the sustainable development paradigm, you know? And even this intergenerational equity sounds really good, what we are delivering to the next generations to come. But when you think in a original nation's perspective, it's the other way around as well. What kind of future generations we are delivering to this world? How we behave? What kind of public policy we are taking into consideration? So for the beginning, let me tell you some alternatives to these problems. In original nations, we are suffering from floodings and droughts and all of that, but we are going to continue doing the work we have been doing for millennia and for centuries. Now it's even more difficult because many of our younger generations have been alienated to this system. We are losing languages, we are losing biodiversity. So we need to protect biocultural heritage. There is no nation now, today, that protect biocultural diversity. We need to create those policies because we don't separate culture from nature. They are intertwined. So we are at this moment, and we need to act now. Because all of these agreements, they sound very rational, beautiful, but there is inefficacy. There is lack of application. And even more, the Paris Agreement, as you know, is not really binding. It's just an agreement that you can take it or not. So we call to China, we call to India, and we call to all of those countries that they are, they are saying, we have the right to pollute because others have done in the past. It's not possible. It's not possible if we want to deliver a better world or to respect. So what we are bringing here is the ancestral wisdom, and also remember that agroecology is another tool that we are delivering and also sharing with other people. That's a way of creating really a more sustainable, let's say, more sustainable world, but not in the finance way of thinking, but in a relationship way of thinking. So I don't know how many minutes I have.
If that's okay, we can have time for the Q&A and further discussion later.
Okay, so I just want to say that I'm very grateful to be here with many people that are like-minded. But we need to come together and really work together, feel together, and act together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mindahi, for your words of wisdom. And yeah, hopefully we can, as we get into the question and answer, we can have more of kind of a panel discussion to get into some of those great thoughts a bit more, and maybe some of the examples from Mexico, from your experience, and where we see problems of even so-called green solutions are causing problems and conflicting with the rights of indigenous peoples. So moving to the next, I guess, piece of the agenda and the running order, we'll have a short video that we will show from Pedro Arrojo, who is the UN Special Rapporteur for the rights to water. And he will be previewing a forthcoming statement that several UN Special Rapporteurs have prepared and will be releasing that's focused on the impacts of dams in particular. So unfortunately, Pedro was actually here yesterday, so you might see some of the familiar background, but he wasn't able to stay this morning. So we do have a video from him. So it'd be great if we can show that now.
Dear friends, in November 2000, the World Commission on Dams presented its report stating that dams, well, have made significant contributions to human development, but in too many cases paying an unacceptable price, especially in social and environmental impacts, mainly by riparian communities. Between 40 and 80 million people whose homes were flooded were forcibly displaced, and more than 470 million had their livelihoods severely affected downstream. Resettlement for the displaced and the consequences on downstream livelihoods have led to the impoverishment of millions. In particular, indigenous peoples disproportionately suffered these impacts, together with the loss of their territories and cultural integrity. And on the other hand, once again, gender gaps have widened with women and girls. Unfortunately, the Commission was unable to ensure effective mechanisms to guarantee the adoption of its recommendations, and the human rights to those affected have continued to be transgressed, with displacement that violates human rights to housing, food, water and sanitation, education, as well as the rights of affected indigenous peoples over their territories and their right to free, prior and informed consent, and also violations of the rights to life and freedom of expression through the criminalization of protests, threats, attacks, and even murders of individuals opposing dams, as is the case of my friend Berta Cáceres. Today, many rivers and communities continue to be threatened, mainly by hydroelectric projects. Under the argument of promoting energy transition in the face of climate change, the hydropower industry is promoting a new wave of large hydropower dams. In the absence of human rights standards and safeguards, severely affecting the sustainability of river ecosystems, and despite the existence of less impactful renewable energy options, and even ignoring the denounces and recommendations from the UN system raised, among others, by the UN Special Rapporteurs on Indigenous Peoples, on human rights and the environment, on the right to adequate housing, on internal displaced people, on human rights to drinking water and sanitation, and on human rights defenders, among others. In fact, dear friends, hydropower is not green energy, and large hydropower dams continue to threaten and violate human rights and the sustainability of rivers and aquatic ecosystems on which we depend more than ever with the ongoing climate change. Thank you very much.
Great. So obviously some deep reflections from some quarters within the UN system about the ramifications of hydropower dams and dams writ large on communities. Pedro spoke about the World Commission on Dams report, which was a seminal publication that was released about 20 years ago and really documented very clearly the environmental and social destruction that dams have wrought. And I think the reflection from Pedro and our experience really is that things haven't unfortunately gotten much better in the sector. as much as proponents of hydropower are promoting hydropower as sustainable hydropower as our solution to our energy and climate crises. I mean, as I think we'll hear today, unfortunately, these impacts are continue to manifest even in new projects that are theoretically supposed to be developed sustainably and having learned from all those experiences from the past. So we're very honored to have Chief Ninawa join us. Does he have a microphone? Yes. Yeah. So we had hoped that Chief Ninawa from the Unico people in the Brazilian Amazon and member of the Alliance of Mother Nature's Guardians would be able to offer the opening, but now he's here, so we'll hope that he can deliver some thoughts, and I believe we have Gert who's going to be providing interpretation. So thank you so much. Obrigado.
Sim, ele quer que você faça uma visão geral dessa situação com face às soluções, barragens e outras que afetam a Amazônia.
Okay. Bom dia a todos e a todas. Quero agradecer pelo convite nessa conferência, parabenizar todos os organizadores. Eu venho da região amazônica do Brasil e eu acredito que todos aqui já viram a luta contra os impactos causados pela barragem das hidrelétricas de Belo Monte, Rio Tapajós, Rio Madeira, são movimentos muito grandes contra essas barragens que hoje estão fazendo na região amazônica do Brasil.
Good morning, and thank you to all the people who has organized this event. I'm coming from the Brazilian Amazon rainforest, and I've been accompanying the fight against many dams. I've been supporting the affected people of the dam in the Rio Madeira and the Tapajós, which is a very important river in the Amazon, and also Belo Monte, which is a very unfamous dam.
E é muito importante que possa ser realmente esclarecido a toda a sociedade os grandes impactos em que esses empreendimentos, em que essas hidrelétricas causam dentro das comunidades.
Mm-hmm. It's very important that the civil society wake up about the impacts of this mega structure that have a lot of disastrous impact in our lands.
Hoje nós estamos vendo os grandes prejuízos que a construção das hidrelétricas estão causando, que exterminaram milhares de florestas e medicinas tradicionais, tiraram as pessoas dos seus lugares originários, além de várias espécies de animais também que foram mortos com a construção dessas barragens. É muito importante esclarecer que a energia que é produzida por essas hidrelétricas, elas não são consumidas pelas nossas regiões. Elas são energia para alimentar as grandes multinacionais.
Today we can see the effect of these mega dams. This, I would say, extermination process. They have destroyed our forest. They have destroyed traditional medicine from the forest. They have exposed the the traditional communities that are living near the river. They have destroyed animal species. And it's very important that the people realize that the energy that is produced by this structure doesn't come to the local people. It is used by multinationals companies.
E muitos outros projetos de hidrelétrica têm sido estudados na região amazônica do Brasil, que isso vai causar grandes prejuízos, é uma preocupação muito grande para nós, porque vai seguir destruindo a nossa moradia, contaminando os nossos rios, os nossos peixes e, além disso, está comprometendo totalmente as futuras gerações dessas regiões que são impactadas por essas barragens.
Unfortunately, there are many projects that are being studied and are on their way, and it's going to cause a lot of even more impacts. We know that it will increase the bad situation in the Amazon, and we are very concerned about that. It's going to destroy our rivers. We are not going to be able to fish anymore. And this is going to impact directly the future generations of our peoples.
E hoje eu vejo meus amigos, meus irmãos que estão lutando contra esses empreendimentos, estão sendo ameaçados, suas casas são queimadas, são perseguidos pelo Estado, pela polícia, sofrem tentativa de homicídio.
Mm-hmm. My friends that are fighting against these dams are threatened to death. Their houses are being burned. They have been prosecuted by the police. Each time they really are threatened about their own life, and they receive like phone calls and other things.
Enfim, são informações que às vezes as pessoas não sabem. Porque quando o Estado apresenta um projeto de desenvolvimento, quando apresenta um projeto que faça com que a economia de um país possa aumentar, é muito importante que as pessoas saibam que para poder acontecer tudo isso, precisa destruir os nossos territórios, precisa destruir pessoas para poder aumentar esse desenvolvimento, aumentar essa economia.
The people doesn't know about what's happening in these territories, and if the government always says that it's very good for the economy to implement this kind of structure, people don't realize that we have to destroy some magnificent territories or forests to implement these projects.
E como um exemplo de barragens hoje na região amazônica do Brasil, também são outros tipos de investimento das grandes companhias, como mineradora, como petroleira, como as madeireiras, como o garimpo. Todos esses investimentos que estão sendo hoje implantados dentro da região amazônica do Brasil, está nos preocupando bastante, porque vocês sabem que a Amazônia é considerada o pulmão do mundo. E como essa grande importância, hoje nós estamos vendo a nossa região sendo destruída, e isso é uma grande ameaça para a humanidade.
He is talking not only about mega dams, but they are using mega dams, Trojan horses to implement projects of mining projects. Sorry, I'm French. I'm not supposed to translate into English, but I'm doing my best. But mining project is talking about exploration of oil is talking about the logging, and that all comes, you know, with the dams, and all this project and what all that is happening is a real concern for all of them, and that is threatening humanity as well.
Então, eu quero poder compartilhar com vocês que toda essa preocupação, nós estamos num grande evento, na COP26, aonde a maior intenção dentro dessa conferência é encontrar uma maneira de poder resolver o problema global do efeito estufa.
We are here in this COP26, whereas the main concern is about dealing with the climate change.
Desde da Rio+20, eu venho acompanhando diretamente todas as COP que acontecem, e eu vejo que em todas as COP se faz um acordo para que o governo possa se comprometer em reduzir o desmatamento, a degradação num país e reduzir as emissões. Mas, muito claro aqui, eu digo para vocês que isso não está acontecendo em lugar nenhum do nosso planeta, não está reduzindo a contaminação.
I'm following this, I'm participating to this kind of summit since the Rio+20 summit, and I've been to every COP since then. They pretend each time reducing the degradation, protecting and reducing the emissions, carbon emissions, but nothing changed, and so that's business as usual.
Esse ano de 2020, de 2021, além da pandemia ter afetado nossas comunidades e a gente ficar sem assistência, ainda tivemos que enfrentar grandes alagações que tiveram que ser desabrigado do meu povo, 584 famílias que ficaram desassistidos por conta dessas mudanças climáticas. Os rios estão sendo contaminados todos os dias, o desmatamento tem aumentado grandemente dentro do estado do Acre, em toda a Amazônia, pelo aumento também por estarem ampliando o agronegócio e a agropecuária.
Mm-hmm. We are in 2021, and during the COVID-19 time, our communities are under assault by the Brazilian government. We have experienced as well flooding. 84 families of my people have been abandoned, and our river is contaminated. So deforestation is increasing in the state of Acre, and the farmers are robbing our territories, they are advancing. So the situation is getting even worse.
E uma coisa que eu quero dizer aqui para os senhores e senhoras, hoje grandes programas que são criados entre os líderes mundiais, como, por exemplo, offset, são compensações com rede, também a Net Zero, hoje são grandes programas que têm a mesma intenção de fazer a redução das emissões, das poluição, de levar qualidade de vida para as pessoas nos seus territórios. Porém, esses programas, eles não funcionam, eles não resolvem o problema, não estão garantindo a qualidade de vida das pessoas que estão impactadas com esses empreendimentos. Por isso que, nessa visão, é que nós chamamos esses programas de falsas soluções. Por que são falsas soluções? Porque são as mesmas empresas de petróleo, as mineradoras, que estão destruindo dentro do nosso território, são as mesmas que estão pagando pelas compensações. São as mesmas que financiam este evento, como a COP, por exemplo. e estão pagando as compensações para tirar a responsabilidade do crime que estão cometendo no nosso território, para poder ter o direito de continuar fazendo seus empreendimentos. É isso que significa essas compensações. Por isso que não vai resolver o problema. Por isso que são falsas soluções.
Gert, could you see if he's nearly finished? I also need to give you a break.
Ok. Ok, I translate that. Okay. Ok, vou traduzir. I want to say that what is another concern here is that the leaders that comes to that negotiations, they're talking about offsetting carbon emissions. They're talking about a RED project, net zero project. We're talking about limiting the emissions. But these programs that they are implementing here, that they are promoting here, they don't work. They don't work. And they don't improve our quality of life. This doesn't guarantee at all the quality of our life. That's why we call them false solutions. And another reason that we call them false solutions is that the companies that are financing this program are oil companies, mining companies, and they pay to compensate their own pollution, and they finance this kind of summit at the same time. So that's why we don't believe in that programs, and it's only a way that they found to continue the destruction that will not solve anything.
Então, queria agradecer e dizer isso, e dizer que nós, enquanto povos originários, nós estamos sofrendo grandes ameaças pelo governo brasileiro atualmente. O Congresso Nacional do Brasil está fazendo um ataque sistemático com projetos de lei que querem retirar os nossos direitos sobre o nosso território, e isso também é uma grande ameaça, porque é uma nova onda de genocídio que pode acontecer se esses projetos de lei forem aprovados. E dizer que uma das soluções que nós temos para, verdadeiramente, concreta, como solução para as crises climáticas, é devolver os territórios sagrados do nosso povo, fazer a proteção. Os líderes mundiais têm que entender isso, têm que discutir estratégia que verdadeiramente vai resolver o problema. Tem países que estão se comprometendo, daqui 30 anos, ter zero contaminação, daqui 50 anos ter zero contaminação. É mentira. Os automóveis continuam sendo produzidos, os petróleos continuam sendo retirados da terra, os empreendimentos continuam sendo feitos. O consumo da soja, da carne, da madeira pela Europa, que vem do Brasil, é muito grande. E são produtos que vêm com a destruição das nossas comunidades. Eu dizer isso, muito obrigado, e estou à vontade, se vocês têm alguma pergunta, alguma curiosidade, aqui para poder responder. Muito obrigado.
Okay. We are threatened, indigenous people, native people, we are threatened by our government. At this moment in the National Congress of Brazil, they try to implement laws that will destroy our right to land. There's a lot of projects that are on their way, and they're going to cause a new wave of genocide in Brazil. And the solution that we have is that simply we ask for the recognition of our territories as sacred territories, sacred spaces, and that should be included in the diplomacy here, in the strategy that are being implemented by the states. Otherwise, all the projects that they have saying that they will solve the problem in 30 years from now, 50 years from now, it's all lies. It's not going to work. And you can see that while they are saying that, The petrol exploration is going on. The mining companies are still destroying nature, and it's happening in Europe. They're still importing a lot of products like soja, soy. So that means that's not the good direction. If you have any questions, I'm here, and I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chief Niniwa. And thank you also, Gert, for standing in to translate between two languages that are not your own. So if we could bring up the PowerPoint, I will be presenting in the stead of my colleague Emmanuel, who could not be with us today, but I will be speaking about the INGO Dam that's proposed in the Democratic Republic of Congo, its connections to green hydrogen, and also take a quick look at energy alternatives. So I'll try to keep it relatively short. So just a couple things about the Congo River in Central Africa. It's one of the mightiest in the world. The flows of the Congo are second in the world, and have enormous, throughout all seasons, the Congo is flowing and mighty. And that includes bringing vast sediments from the Congo rainforest into the ocean. And this plays a very important role in mitigating climate change. It's a vast carbon sink. So here is a satellite image of the sediments brought to the ocean, and this is called the Congo Plume. For hundreds or thousands of miles, you could see the sediment coming out from the Congo River into the Atlantic Ocean. So because of the Congo River's its mightiness and its might and its power, people have been looking at the INGO site for hydropower for decades, even since colonial times. The INGO site has been acknowledged as potentially the largest hydropower potential of anywhere in the world. What we see here are INGOs 1 and 2, which were built in the 1970s and the 1980s. These are mostly used to provide power thousands of miles across the country to eastern Congo, where there's the mining industry, and the rest of it is mostly consumed in the capital. So these dams in the 70s and 80s forcibly evicted thousands of people from their territories that were not compensated, many of whom ended up having to live in what had been a workers' camp previously called Camp Kinshasa. And so those people, like those across the world, as documented in the World Commission on Dams, were left deeply impoverished as a result of their evictions. And they still live in this area. So there are plans now to build another dam at the INGO site. The more modest version would be INGO 3. And this project has mobilized opposition from Congolese civil society who have opposed the project because there is no transparency around the project. The electricity would mostly be for export or to the mines in eastern Congo. And you can see from this slide where this is literally thousands of kilometers. The INGO site on the west part of Congo near the Atlantic Ocean, and then the transmission line that would be built to evacuate the power over the entire country, essentially, to the mining areas, and then potentially export it onward to South Africa. So again, the communities who had been previously displaced, in addition to other communities, tens of thousands of people would have to be relocated, this time many more than previously. And perhaps the most kind of glaring issue with this project is that it will do virtually nothing to address the 90% of Congolese who lack access to electricity. The power's some of it would go to the capital, but the rest of it would be going for extractive industries and for export. And really, I mean, 90% of Congolese don't have access to electricity, and that's among, if not the worst in the world. So the World Bank had been involved in the INGO 3 dam in its preparation. It ended up canceling its support for the project. One of the world's largest construction firms, ACS from Spain, ended up withdrawing its involvement in the consortium that won the bid to build the dam. But most recently, the Australian company FMG, Fortescue Metals Group, that's led by billionaire Andrew Forrest, who you see on the left here. You may have also seen him walking around the halls here at COP. I've seen him, he's been very active in talking about how green hydrogen, so-called green hydrogen, will be the centerpiece for the energy transition. So he is pictured here with the DRC president, Felix Tshisekedi, who is also actually here at COP. And this is from when a few months ago, the FMG, Andrew Forrest, won the contract or the rights to develop the INGO site, and not the 4.8 gigawatt size project that had originally been designed. It would be almost 10 times as large. So the entire Grand INGO site could conceivably have up to over 40 gigawatts of power in and of itself, which would be double the largest existing hydropower project in the world, which is the Three Gorges Dam in China. So it would just be on this massive scale. And so this idea of green hydrogen, as kind of our savior, the idea of green hydrogen being that it's hydrogen produced from renewable energy, in this case, hydropower. Many of us, I think, dispute the idea that hydropower can be considered green, but that's at least, there are many different colors or shades that are discussed when talking about hydrogen. So green hydrogen is what Andrew Forrest is really promoting as bringing renewable energy to generate hydrogen. So when the announcement was made that Fortescue would be developing the Grand INGO project, organizations in the Congo mobilized. This was from CORAP, Emmanuel, who was supposed to be here. His organization prepared this statement, basically rejecting the deal, saying that this would be the largest deal ever made in Congo. And you can't just give it away to a company. You have to follow procurement rules and the like. So just a couple words about green hydrogen then. I mean, hydrogen has been used in industry for decades. It's mostly used for fertilizers. Hydrogen is the most abundant atom in the world, but it has to be separated from other gases to make it actually usable. So the kind of conventional normal way would be to take methane, for example, and break apart the hydrogen, but it's extremely greenhouse gas intensive, that process. But what you can also do is use electricity to react with water to break apart the hydrogen and oxygen atoms. So that's the idea for green hydrogen, is that you would use renewable energy to do that. That process is also extremely energy intensive, and theoretically, if you're using renewable energy, then you can do it without a large greenhouse gas footprint. So some of the issues briefly with hydrogen and the idea that green hydrogen will be, is the solution that we're looking for. It's simply not efficient. As you can see up here, you can use renewable energy to power a hydrogen fuel cell that can then be used to heat or power homes, or you can simply use renewable energy to heat and power a home. So you see the difference is about 4 times more efficient if you simply use renewable energy for the home, rather than converting it into hydrogen and then using it. And hydrogen only really makes sense if it's widely adopted. Right now it's mostly just industry that uses it. It would have to be really a global effort where cars are going to be made from, fueled by hydrogen. Industry is going to be fueled by hydrogen. And really there's no conceivable way that it could all be sourced from renewable energy, in which case you have to fill that up with the very extremely dirty hydrogen that's normally produced from greenhouse gas or from fossil fuels. It's also very difficult to store and to transport, though there's been a lot of, they are making headway there. It's also extremely combustible, so it can be quite dangerous. You may remember the Hindenburg is a very famous example of hydrogen crashing and burning. So this is all not to say that hydrogen can't be, the solution or part of the solution, but I think there's many reasons to be skeptical that that's about the kind of grand claims that have been made. And when it comes to the INGO dam in particular, I think the flaws are pretty immediately apparent. So far from being a green source of energy, to create hydrogen, Grand INGO would effectively cause the collapse of the Congo Plume, all that sediment that makes it into the ocean and becomes this massive carbon sink. That sediment would be trapped. And so it would have massive ramifications on the climate. Another issue is that sub-Saharan Africa only has about 68 gigawatts of electricity installed for 48 countries. Grand INGO alone would be 40 gigawatts. So you're saying that basically the same amount nearly that Africa has would be used to create a fuel that would then be exported, presumably to Europe. Tens of thousands of people would have to be displaced. Nobody knows really what the footprint of Grand INGO would be. It would be vast. And that would include the reservoir backing up into the DRC's neighbors. And these are all pretty intractable issues. And finally, it would have, obviously it would do nothing to address the 90% of Congolese who lack electricity. So just a couple words on alternatives. I mean, there are obviously ways that you can deliver energy access to those who lack it. There's been a lot of research done into places like the Congo about what are viable. If you start with electricity access for people as your starting point, and then move backward, there are many options that are available. So this is a photo actually from neighboring Cameroon, a micro hydro that can be developed and community driven, low impact, just for villages and towns. This has been effective in delivering electricity in many countries. And so that if the DRC and if their financiers, et cetera, were to instead put their attention and investments in these types of options, you would actually see electricity delivered to those who lack it. Similarly, DRC, like many African countries, has a high solar potential. There have been studies, I think I have a slide here, of sites that could be done, sites for solar and wind, actually, that could not only address electricity access issues at kind of the community level, they could also be brought into the electricity grid and used for powering cities and towns. So I think that's the end of my presentation. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of leave that with you. I'm sorry, Emmanuel really wishes that he could be here with us. Hopefully he'll be able to join later this week. I wanted to share that with you, so thanks.
I don't know if my microphone is connected. It is, yeah. Thank you. So my name is Gert Brook, and I'm the founder of Planet Amazon, which is a French NGO that is working with indigenous people. We created that NGO at the moment of the Belo Monte Dam when it begins to be a worldwide issue and concern. And so we saw that dam being built in total violation of indigenous people rights. And we understood that it was a shift really if we would let this dam being constructed, that would be very difficult in the future to stop other dams from being built. At this point, we're going to do a presentation this afternoon about ecocide crime. And we really think that they are good. These mega dams are very good examples of ecocide crimes, and that should help ecocide crimes being recognized. I would like to show you just a slide about Sinop Dam. I don't know if you can show that.
Excuse me. I was just wondering if I will get a chance to speak as well.
Yeah, if we,
That's,
I think we'll have to move
speaking
to
of indigenous rights as an indigenous woman and the
have
only
the,
woman
the
on
video
this panel.
and then Brianna.
Sorry?
I think
and
we
I
can show the
apologize to
video
cut you off.
and then
I didn't
have
invite you.
Brianna.
I apologize.
But you're cutting my words like that. It's very unpolite.
Well, I think just in terms of, we have about 12 minutes left. We have a 5-minute video on energy options and how solar and wind can displace these big projects. And then we can have you, Brianna, who joined late, to kind of end with some of your thoughts, if that's okay. Yeah. So is that possible? We can move to the video now and then move to Brianna finally.
Greetings from Santa Barbara, California. My name is Ranjit Deshmukh. I'm an assistant professor in the Environmental Studies program at the University of California, Santa Barbara. I direct the Clean Energy Transformation Lab on campus. At SET Lab, we focus on low carbon and just transitions in energy systems by applying energy systems modeling, empirical analysis, and social science research methods. Today, I'm going to speak to you about large hydropower and its role in energy provision, and specifically in low carbon transitions. We all know that large hydropower projects can have significant impacts on the local environment. They displace communities, they flood culturally important sites. Many hydropower reservoirs, especially in tropical regions, emit methane, which is a deadly greenhouse gas. Studies on past hydropower projects have shown that cost overruns that on average doubled the initial cost, while other estimates say at least 70% cost overruns. Hydropower generation is also variable across years, and many projects are vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. So there are many more negative impacts, which I'm sure will be covered by my co-panelists. But at the same time, large hydropower is also being promoted as a technology that is essential to low carbon energy systems. Given its negative impacts, does large hydropower have credible, cost-effective, and reliable alternatives? Well, most of you know that wind and solar technologies have huge potential in most countries and are rapidly declining in costs. But how do we know that wind and solar resources, which are weather dependent and hence variable in time and space, can be credible alternatives to large hydropower? The sun rises in the morning and sets in the evening. Wind is dependent on wind speeds which change throughout the year. So we want to know whether wind and solar can be reliable alternatives to large hydropower. So for that, my research team develops detailed optimization models that simulate the operations of future wind and solar projects. How much energy would they generate during every hour of the future year? Right? How much energy would be available from existing and planned hydropower projects? By even incorporating climate change impacts, how would coal and gas power plants operate in future systems? And considering costs and technical constraints, what would be the most optimal investments in generation, transmission, and even battery storage? So what did we find? In our recent work in Southern Africa, we found that across all scenarios, half of the planned hydropower plants were not cost-effective to be developed. Further, if we avoid hydropower projects that are located in places with high biodiversity value or are likely to displace large populations, the cost of the overall system does not increase by much. Moreover, certain strategies can help avoid large hydropower and cost-effectively integrate high shares of wind and solar into electricity systems. These strategies include transmission interconnections to access the best wind and solar resources and to smooth their variability. When the wind dies down in one place, it picks up in other places. But we also need well-functioning electricity markets to facilitate trade. Costs of battery storage are also rapidly falling, making this technology viable for balancing renewable energy. So where is our work heading? Presently, we're developing our models for the Southern African region and India. My colleagues are working on models for the US, China, and Myanmar. All these models will be free and open source for any stakeholder to use. This will enable more stakeholders to participate in the planning process and question the assumptions that decision makers and policymakers use to justify projects. We hope that such models and decision-making tools can help question large hydropower projects, not just on environmental and social grounds, but also economic and technical reasons, because there are viable, cost-effective, and reliable alternatives to large hydropower. The websites are given on this particular slide. If you wish to contact me, please do so. With that, I wish you all the best, and I hope you have a significantly positive impact on COP26. Thank you.
Great. So that's Ranjit Deshmukh from UC Santa Barbara. So really kind of his work is really tackling that question of, that we always hear, oh yeah, wind and solar are great, but what about when the wind doesn't blow and the sun isn't shining? I mean, that's obviously a technical issue, and there's been a lot of work that's gone into really maximizing the amount of solar and wind, and that competes very competitively with these big dam projects and other types of generation projects that are proposed in places like Southern Africa and Myanmar and elsewhere. So for the final time, I think we'll hand it over to Brianna from Indigenous.
I just wanted to say, sorry, just 2 words about the French company's EDF. Is very short. I want to point out that as citizens, we have a part, you can have a part in the process of trying to stop these mega dams. For instance, these dams are made with our tax money. So if you are French, for instance, you can choose another energy supplier. So that's very important that citizens
I am Brianna
think
Brown
about
from the Natsivut Labrador on the East Coast in Canada. I'm Inuk and Mi'kmaq. I'm here with Indigenous Climate Action, and frankly, I don't care how rude you think I am. I'm on Indigenous Climate Action's National Steering Committee, and I work in anti-human trafficking. Human trafficking of Indigenous peoples is a result of the colonial violence imposed on our communities by natural resource projects and hydro projects currently being marketed to us as a solution to climate change, which is manipulative and false. I have different names or titles for the work I do, but what matters to me most is having the responsibility of being a water and land protector, as this enables our people to connect and revitalize to our cultures and our well-being. Hydro projects impact our indigenous communities negatively by polluting our waters with various chemicals, including methylmercury poisoning, which through our water is absorbed by the marine life, which is eaten by the animals and ultimately indigenous peoples. The methylmercury is running through our traditional food chains, causing extreme health issues in the animals, waters, and peoples. I found this information from the World Health Organization on the negative health impacts of methylmercury, which include toxic effects on the nervous, digestive, and immune systems, and on lungs, kidneys, skin, and eyes. The primary health effects of methylmercury is impairing neurological development. Therefore, cognitive thinking, memory, attention, language, and fine motor and visual spatial skills may be affected in children who are exposed to methylmercury as fetuses. Another large concern is the systemic racism in the healthcare system in Labrador and Canada towards Inuit and Indigenous peoples. We are forced without consent to bear the burden of the health impacts of this poisoning, which affects our ability to function in the world, to gain an education, to maintain and gain employment, to protect and feed ourselves and our families. This oppression therefore stunts our abilities to exist in a healthy manner, which would allow us the strength to gain leadership or be included in decision-making of our lands. Of course, this is done on purpose. I have personally experienced the racism in the healthcare system in Newfoundland and Labrador and in Canada when being hit by a vehicle in a pedestrian vehicle accident. I was denied assessment and treatment by medical staff because the imbalance in my walking from being hit in the hip and the displacement of my jaw causing trouble with my breathing had caused me to be dizzy. And to them, they had assumed that I was intoxicated. And this happens all the time to Indigenous peoples and is very racist. My health became so poor, I moved to Alberta hoping I would escape the racism and gain access to healthcare. In Alberta, I learned that the oil and gas industry causes violence towards Indigenous peoples similarly. Moving away is an example of climate displacement. As my jaw became infected and I became so weak that I could not even take out the trash without being exhausted, I was heavily taken advantage of by NGOs and men working in these projects. Displacement caused isolation for me, which is one of the leading causes of the national crisis in Canada called Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, and Two-Spirit. Untreated medical injuries paired with extreme racism contributes to the overrepresentation of incarcerated Indigenous peoples, as over 80% of women incarcerated in Canada have a traumatic brain injury. Unfortunately, the purposeful displacement of Indigenous peoples and the exploitation of our peoples benefits those companies that are accessing these lands without consent for the purpose of power and financial gain. The Indigenous peoples protecting their lands from hydro dams along the Churchill River stemming from Manitoba all the way to the East Coast and Labrador are experiencing flooding as well, which is destroying our homes, lands, and ways of being. These projects are not built for energy security of our communities. It is built for the energy security, which builds power for communities and countries outside of our Indigenous nations.
It will cut off in less than a minute, so you know.
I would like to read a quote by our dear friend, Kyle White. If nature-based solutions were associated with land back, with the recovery of sovereignty, with empowerment, with the building of Indigenous power, then I think it would be very, very important. But most of the time, when I hear about nature-based solutions, it does not mean any of that. And this speaks to the corruption and manipulation of colonial institutions and its marketing. The same marketing that convinces us that we are not good enough, so that we buy their products, so that we constantly consume. We do not want fake marketing to sell us lies, we want the truth. We get that by practicing and pursuing the true meaning of Land Back. Land Back is a movement I started June 10, 2019, and its representation entails many things.
Thank you, everyone. It's cutting off now. Thanks so much for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're already cut off of the time, I'm afraid. Like, we're in negative territory here. they have to get ready for the next session. But hopefully some of us can stick around